There is a book that sat locked in a bank vault for 50 years. Not because it was illegal, not because it was secret, because the man who wrote it feared what it could do. Carl Jung, the psychologist behind introversion, archetypes, the collective unconscious, and the shadow, kept his most important work hidden. He wrote it during a period he described as somewhere between vision and madness, then locked it away and refused to publish it. After his death, it remained sealed until 2009. What it contains isn't conventional psychology. It's the record of one man's descent into the deepest parts of the human mind. And what Jung found there may change how you see reality forever. Stay until the end, because the final lesson was the one Jung considered the most dangerous. 1. What Jung was actually doing when he wrote it. In 1913, Carl Jung was 38 years old. He had recently ended his relationship with Sigmund Freud, the most important intellectual relationship of his life, a break that was both professional and deeply personal. He was losing the theoretical framework that had organized his understanding of the psyche. He was entering what he later described as a period of inner uncertainty that bordered on psychological disintegration. And he made a decision that no responsible member of the medical and psychological establishment would endorse. He decided to go in, not into analysis with someone else, not into the careful, bounded exploration of supervised therapeutic process. He decided to deliberately induce in himself the states that his most disturbed patients experienced involuntarily. To open the door to the unconscious, fully, without protection, without the professional distance that his training had established, and to go where it led. He called this experiment the confrontation with the unconscious. And what followed, beginning in December 1913 and continuing for 16 years, was the most extraordinary inner journey ever documented by a trained scientific mind. He began by lying on the floor and deliberately relaxing every cognitive defense he had spent a lifetime building. And the unconscious, released from the suppression of professional rationality, began to speak, in voices, in figures, in landscapes of extraordinary vividness that were more real to him, he later wrote, than the ordinary reality of his daily life. He heard a voice that told him he was practicing art. He argued back, "I am not practicing art. I am doing science." The voice disagreed, persistently. He encountered a figure he called Elijah, who later transformed into a figure he called Philemon, who became, for the years of the Red Book's creation, his primary interior guide. Philemon was not a product of Jung's imagination. This is the crucial thing to understand about how Jung related to these figures. He was not making them up, he was encountering them. The distinction between imagination as creation and imagination as encounter is the central philosophical claim of the Red Book. And it is the claim that makes it dangerous. 2. The most dangerous idea in the Red Book. Jung's most radical claim, the one that the psychological establishment has never quite known what to do with, the one that the religious establishment has never quite known how to claim, the one that sits between every available category and refuses to be contained by any of them, is this. The figures that appear in the interior, in dreams, in visions, in the imagery of genuine depth psychology, are not products of the subjective mind. They are real. Not real in the sense of having physical bodies, not real in the sense of existing independently of the psyche that encounters them. Real in a third sense that Jung spent his life trying to articulate. Psychically real, objectively present within the domain of the psyche, autonomous, purposeful, possessed of knowledge and perspective that the conscious mind does not have and cannot manufacture. When Jung encountered Philemon, when the old man with kingfisher wings appeared in his visions and spoke to him and taught him things he did not know he knew, Jung's experience was not of a character he had invented. It was of a presence he had met. He wrote, "Philemon represented a force which was not myself. In my fantasies I held conversations with him, and he said things which I had not consciously thought. He said I treated thoughts as if I generated them myself, but in his view, thoughts were like animals in the forest, or people in a room. It was he who taught me psychic objectivity, the reality of the psyche. The reality of the psyche. This is the dangerous claim. Not that the unconscious contains useful material for therapy. Not that dreams deserve interpretation. Not that the interior life has psychological significance. That the interior is a domain of reality. As real, in its own terms, as the exterior world. Populated by genuine presences. Not hallucinations, not metaphors, not fictional characters, but autonomous beings, with their own existence within the psychic realm. And that the human being who can access this domain, who can enter it consciously, navigate it with sufficient ego strength to not be destroyed by it, and return with what it contains, has access to a dimension of reality that the exterior-focused, rationality-privileged, unconscious-denying modern world has systematically closed off. This is dangerous not because it is false. It is dangerous because, if it is true, if even partially true, it requires a complete reorganization of what we consider real, what we consider knowledge, and what we consider a sane and responsible relationship with the full range of human experience. 3. What Jung found in the depths, and what it cost him. The Red Book is not a comfortable read. It is not the organized, theoretically coherent, professionally responsible writing of the public Jung. It is raw. It is visionary. It is, in places, genuinely frightening. What Jung encountered in the depths was not only beauty and wisdom. He encountered what he called the spirit of the depths, a force entirely different from and opposed to the spirit of the times, the rational, forward-looking, progress-oriented, surface-dwelling spirit that modern civilization runs on. The spirit of the times says, look outward, produce, achieve, optimize, advance. The spirit of the depths says, everything you are running toward is not where the meaning lives. Turn around, go in. What you are avoiding is what you need. The encounter between these two spirits, played out in the interior dramas of the Red Book across 16 years, is not comfortable, is not resolved cleanly, is not wrapped in the kind of psychological framework that makes it safe to hold. It is the record of a genuine struggle between the part of Jung that was a respectable Swiss doctor and the part that was being pulled into territories that respectable Swiss doctors are not supposed to visit. He encountered the shadow, the full, unmanaged, uncivilized weight of everything he had suppressed in the process of becoming who the world knew him to be. He encountered figures that represented forces far larger than personal psychology, figures that he could only describe in the language of mythology, of religion, of the archetypal, the layer of the psyche that is not personal but collective, not individual but universal. He encountered what he called the numinous, a term he borrowed from the theologian Rudolf Otto to describe the experience of something simultaneously terrifying and compelling, sacred and dangerous, real in a way that ordinary experience is not. And all of this cost him. His marriage was strained to breaking point. His professional relationships were disrupted. His certainty about the nature of reality, the certainty that a scientific education is supposed to provide, was shattered and had to be rebuilt from the inside out. He later wrote that the years of the Red Book were the most important years of his life, the foundation of everything that followed, the source from which all his later work flowed. But they were also, he wrote, the years of his greatest danger. The danger of not coming back, of being so completely absorbed into the interior that the exterior, the daily life, the professional responsibilities, the relationships, the grounded connection with ordinary reality dissolved entirely. He survived. He returned. He brought back what he found, and spent the remaining 45 years of his life trying to translate it into a language the world could use. But the Red Book is the untranslated version. The raw encounter, before the theory, before the framework, before the professional responsibility of making it safe for general consumption. And reading it, genuinely reading it, requires something that most of Jung's other work does not. The willingness to let it be what it is. Not a metaphor, not a case study, not an interesting example of symbolic thinking. The record of a man who went to the place where reality is not yet divided into inner and outer, sane and mad, real and imaginary, and who came back reporting on what he found. 4. The specific visions that changed everything. Let us go into what is actually in the Red Book, because it is not enough to describe it in general terms. The specific content, the specific visions that Jung recorded and illustrated and wrestled with across 16 years, is where the real teaching lives. The first vision, the Sea of Blood. Jung's first major vision, in December 1913, was of a catastrophic flood, an enormous wave engulfing northern Europe, blood mixing with the water, the death of hundreds of thousands. He saw this, vividly, repeatedly, with the quality of something that was happening rather than something he was imagining, and he assumed it meant he was going mad. That the vision was a symptom of approaching psychosis. Then, in August 1914, World War I began, and Jung understood, not smugly, not with triumph, but with something closer to terror, what had happened. He had not been hallucinating his private madness. He had been receiving, through the extraordinary sensitivity of the individuated psyche, what was about to emerge in the collective. The unconscious knew what consciousness did not yet. The boundary between the individual psyche and the collective was more permeable than the modern framework allows. This vision, and its confirmation in the eruption of the war, was the foundation of everything that followed. The Red Book is, in a very specific sense, Jung's attempt to understand what it means to be connected to a layer of reality that knows things the conscious individual does not, and what it requires of the person who carries that connection. The second vision, the murder of Siegfried. In one of the most disturbing passages of the Red Book, Jung records a dream in which he kills Siegfried, the Germanic hero, the embodiment of the heroic ideal, the figure of conscious will imposing itself triumphantly on the world. He kills him, and then he flees, pursued by guilt and the awareness that something important has ended. The interpretation Jung arrived at, over months of sitting with the vision, was not about literal violence. It was about the death of the hero psychology, the end of the belief that the conscious will, intelligent, directed, heroic, is sufficient. That the hero, the part of the psyche committed to mastery, to achievement, to the imposition of order and purpose on the world, must die before the deeper work can begin. Not permanently, not in all contexts, but in the specific context of the encounter with the unconscious. The heroic stance is a liability. It tries to conquer what can only be encountered, to master what can only be met, to solve what can only be lived through. The death of Siegfried in the Red Book is the death of Jung's certainty that conscious mastery was the answer, and it was the beginning of the humility that made everything that followed possible. The third vision, the encounter with the soul. Throughout the Red Book, Jung engages in dialogue with a figure he calls his soul, his anima, the feminine inner figure that bridges the conscious and the unconscious. These dialogues are extraordinary. The soul is not gentle. It is not supportive in the way that modern therapy is taught to be supportive. It challenges. It demands. It says things that Jung does not want to hear, that his achievements are not the point, that his certainty is an obstacle, that the deepest work requires the sacrifice of the things he is most proud of. One exchange, paraphrased from the complexity of Jung's original language, captures the essential quality of these dialogues. Jung says to the soul, "I understand the unconscious. I have mapped it. I have built a science of it." The soul says, "You have built a map. You have not entered the territory." The map and the territory. This distinction between the intellectual framework that organizes the psyche from a safe distance and the direct, unprotected, genuinely risky encounter with what the psyche actually contains is the central teaching of the Red Book. The map is useful. Jung spent his life building maps that have genuinely helped millions of people. But the map is not the reality. And the person who knows the map but has never entered the territory does not know what the map is of. The fourth vision, the pleroma. In one of the most philosophically radical sections of the Red Book, a section Jung later developed into a work called The 7 Sermons to the Dead, he describes a concept he borrowed from Gnostic theology: the pleroma, the fullness, the undifferentiated totality from which all individual existence emerges and to which it returns. The state before the distinction between self and other, before the division of experience into subject and object, before the separation of inner and outer that the conscious mind depends on. Jung is not advocating for dissolution into the pleroma. He is not describing enlightenment as the loss of individual consciousness. He is describing the ground from which individual consciousness emerges. And he is making a claim that has profound implications for how we understand reality. The reality that the conscious mind navigates, the world of distinct objects and separate selves and clear boundaries between things, is real. But it is not the only level of reality. Beneath it, or perhaps more accurately, prior to it, is the pleroma, the level at which the distinctions have not yet been made, at which the boundary between the individual psyche and the collective is not yet fixed, at which the separation between mind and matter, between what happens inside consciousness and what happens in the physical world, is not yet absolute. This is the level at which synchronicity operates, at which the dream knows what waking does not, at which the visions of 1913 could contain the reality of 1914. The Red Book is Jung's attempt to make contact with this level, consciously, deliberately, without losing the individual consciousness that makes the contact meaningful. 5. Why it stayed locked for 50 years. Jung's decision to keep the Red Book private for his entire life, and his family's decision to keep it locked for 50 years after his death, was not arbitrary, was not simple grief or protectiveness. It was a considered response to a genuine danger. The danger was not that people would think Jung was mad. He had already managed his public reputation carefully enough that the Red Book could have been dismissed as an interesting eccentricity. The danger was that people would use it wrong, would encounter the record of his descent into the unconscious, and attempt to replicate it without what he had: the decades of clinical training, the extraordinary ego strength, the grounded professional life, the ongoing relationships that kept him tethered to ordinary reality during the years of the journey.